Are you looking for help with your rest and recovery, wanting to optimize your sleep and prime performance? Well, New Calm is built on neuroscience, and it's been used by special operators, SportTAC, pro sports teams, and many, many more for years. To learn more and access the best deals of the year, go to newcalm.co/grit. That's Newcalm, NUCALM.co/grit. We often talk about service and identity beyond the badge. Valor Technical Cleaning is a veteran-owned, nationwide biohazard remediation company hiring active and retired officers for business development roles. With Valor, you can build relationships with local agencies and continue to foster care for the community following tragedy. Continue serving, just in a new way. Visit valortechnicalcleaning.com and click Careers. The views and opinions expressed by the host and guests of this show do not represent their employing agency, department, or organization. All information should be regarded as anecdotal, contextual, and educational, and should not be misinterpreted as legal or medical advice. Welcome to Blue Grit Radio, the podcast that explores making better cops for a better community. I'm your host, Eric Tung. I've been an active police officer since 2007. We will dive into the aspects of police culture, health and wellness, leadership, and mindset. You'll hear from experts not only from policing, but all industries as they relate to being our best with purpose, passion, and positivity. Join me as we share stories, lessons, and advice so we can all be better for ourselves, our teams, our families, and our communities. This is part 2 of a 2-part interview. If you didn't listen to part 1, make sure to go back an episode or so you don't miss any of the good stuff. All right, here we go.
Yeah, or the young, crusty guy and gal, because that's like,
Yes.
that seems, maybe it's me getting
You're
older
better.
where you think you
Yeah.
see it so much more. But yeah, it just goes back to the earlier point of that cynicism that gets kind of baked in, that we gotta fight it if we don't want to just accept it, right? And cynicism, negativity, like it happens and we understand why. And I love how, I forget the author. So, I mean, if you look it up, you might find a couple authors and psychologists that speak on this. But, uh, we think it's self-protecting, right? So if I expect the worst, that way I won't be disappointed when I see the worst. When I do get backstabbed or front stabbed, if I assumed it and I saw it coming, well, that feels better. But it actually isn't, because I'm creating that environment for my thoughts. And I think it was Rich when you said, hey, like, how do we interrupt these thought patterns? How do we get to something more constructive? Because let's just like think about this logically. If you want to find differences, absolutely. Like the four of us are having a conversation that's going generally in one direction. We're like, hey, here's a challenge. Here's some things that could be helpful. But if you wanted to pick apart, if we wanted to just find all the differences between us, like we wouldn't have to try very hard, and we could start finding and highlighting them, right? So sure, like you did the job, but not the same time I did the job, so it's different. Yes, of course, right? Like I don't know what it's like to be a patrol officer starting today. I think it's more complicated. I think you have to grapple with more things. I also think and perceive that because you're a generation that was raised a little bit more emotionally intelligent than my generation and those before, then maybe that is more complicated for you to sift through all these different emotions. But but at the same time, perhaps not a but a yes and is yes, and I've dealt with stress and I have a means that I think I can help you process, or we can have a conversation, or help me understand, right? Like how do we generate those conversations? Because yes, there are so many things different about people and perspective. We want to put the walls up. However, there's a lot that's the same. And I think it just even goes to that humility of leadership that a couple of you spoke on. I can be led absolutely by a civilian that has nothing to do with anything in first responder work, because perhaps they've been a parent and they've navigated medical issues with their kid, whereas I haven't had to do that yet. But God forbid if I do at one point, I could certainly learn a lot from that person's wisdom and their care that they should want to share with me.
No, absolutely. And the term I use is we get around people that sit in their own shit and they wonder why it stinks. And they recruit within.
Yeah.
They say, "Hey, can you smell this?" And everyone's shaking their head yes, and they get closer, and sooner or later we've bred this cynical, toxic environment. And everybody is just sitting in their own shit, wondering why it stinks and not making or taking the action to move. At the end of the day, it goes back to what Megan was saying. It's that self accountability. At what point are you going to get up, wipe yourself off, and stop moving forward? Because at the end of the day, your three emails to that agency. The first email is the welcome email that we all get, or I got a letter, so I'm going to date myself a little bit, and then we all work towards that second email, right? The normal service retirement where they tell you, hey, congrats, but turn all your shit in and don't forget your gas card. And if you're lucky enough, that third email comes out about your services when you pass, and what you did between one and two, within the agency and within the four walls of your home is really what matters. So you can be mad, you can form this us versus them, you can sit in your own shit, but at the end of the day, you're gonna have to leave the agency at some point and face reality when you get home. And that's where the real identity crisis, I believe, happens.
Yeah. So on that, like I think a lot of us can recognize, okay, I've definitely had phases in my life, or maybe there's certain people I'm around where I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm sitting in it, right? So when you do have that, what are some things that have helped each of you in that pattern interrupt? Like for people that are feeling that, like, oh man, when I go to that squad, or when I'm around this shift, like it's not so great. Like, how can we recognize that and how can we course correct?
Definitely seeing like different roll calls. Each squad is different. And although they're different, the victim mindset like is prevalent when you are sitting around complaining and stuff. But then you see that one squad that has that difference in trying to find out what it is. It is that self accountability. They're choosing to, be positive, or hey, if it's their airing a grievance, then it's just that. It's not like just complaining for the sake of complaining. They're actually, taking action on whatever it is. Like, okay, I see a problem. I'm going to solve that problem and take that responsibility. So it's huge, but there's so many things that we can do to take that accountability, whether that be on the job or at home. I mean, because it bleeds over at home too. But we have to be able to turn that off or flip that switch, whatever you need to do. And there's tons of tools and ways to do that, to take that accountability, to be like, hey, I need to turn off this negativity now that I'm at home.
Yeah, it's essentially installing that dimmer switch. There's no on-off switch. I don't think we all hear it. We all wanna believe that there is, but, it's taking the 10 minutes in the driveway or taking that 30-minute drive to really sort your thoughts out before you get home. And I'll also say, I think what differentiates the teams that David was talking about is holding informal leaders accountable for what they're doing. You have to. There has to be a sense of accountability upward and down. So you have to hold leaders accountable for shaming and causing harm, but you also have to hold your informal leadership as to, hey, is there any evidence to what you're saying? Because if there's not and there's no solution, then you really got to stop complaining about it. If it's just something to rile up the folks and get them all on board of whatever the stop pattern is that you have, all you're causing is uh, more hypervigilance, more anxiety internally that they're carrying out into these interactions with citizens. And nobody really hits on that. I think the internal stressors. I think the FOP has done multiple surveys as to how much internal stressors impact first responders, and it definitely outweighs the one-off critical incidents. So if we're causing folks internally this type of anxiety, and then sending them out to be scrutinized for every last action that they take, why would you wanna stay? Or why would you how do you force yourself to be positive? And I think it's bidirectional. You have to hold each yourself accountable as well as the organization needs to be held accountable as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that cannot be overstated, as far as like the stress from administration, right? And like I recognize I'm a part of that, and David probably recognizes he's a part of that. Like I'm sure we're people and we're we're colleagues to some, and I'm sure we're brass to others, right? And so I can't per se control that. I can try to influence it based on how I interact. But this is even before that. What you're just sharing, Rich, it makes me think about that stress. And there's been days, weeks that I've lost sleep over something that I was dealing with a colleague or a boss, or just trends that are happening in the job and organization, not really the things that I was encountering outside, right?
Right.
I worked after Ferguson, that was pretty challenging. I worked after Floyd, that was very challenging. But I knew more what to expect per se, and I knew how I could process it and kind of draw those mental barriers and boundaries. But to share even like some ownership there is like, as a sergeant, I was known for kicking back a lot of paper. Like, I'm not necessarily proud of it. It's just how I thought I could show up the best. Like I thought that's how it would be helpful. But there was one officer that was going through it with, historically a lot of different supervisors. And so when it came to me, I kicked back one report because he wrote, I found probably cause for blank. I kicked it back because I was like, man, I've been on the stand in defense. I had me read a sentence. I don't want him to like be called out to read like I found probably cause, and the jury thinks you're dumb and you're not dumb, all that stuff, right? So I know why I did it, but because of his history, he actually called a union rep, and he called me into a meeting, and I was like, what's up, man? And he hands me the piece of paper, and he's just sitting there, and he's almost like trembling, and he's just like, can you please tell me what's wrong with this report? And I was like, yeah, I said like this line, it's probably cause, like you meant probable. I just wanted you to correct that little thing. And then his shoulders go back, he takes this giant sigh, and he's like, I thought you were saying I didn't have probable cause. And I was like, man, am I just completely off base? Like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I don't know how to do this job. My judgment's whack. And then like the case is going to get thrown out. I'm going to get written up. I'm like, oh my gosh, man, no, like, you can come talk to me. But then, he looks at his union rep, and the union rep shrugs. And, like, we had a much better relationship after that, because he was like, man, he's not out to get me, but I can understand how I was still a boss. And it's the progression of how he felt treated through a long time. And so, I mean, I could take it personally, or I could just think, what can I do to help this situation and help this officer? Just how can we all do a little bit better? And it goes from like this thought I have between like, we know why human nature, self protection, self preservation. Uh, but how do we get through that awareness to like team nature? And I don't have like a better coin term right now, but like, and that's kind of what I'm looking for. I'm curious, Meg, your perspectives from being in and then working alongside now, because I think that you have a very critical, objective view that can help us understand some things we could think about.
Yeah, I mean, from when I was working and now what I see with agencies and what I do, I mean, miscommunication, I get that that's simple, but also broad, is oftentimes like the thing that causes so much of this, right? Like that example that you just gave right there, right? This was a super small issue that you saw one way, that he saw another way, and then turned into this massive thing that was obviously impacting you during and after the fact, had been impacting him for God knows how long leading up to the meeting with the union rep, right? And how is that affecting his day to day, his mentality, whatever it is to how you got there, right? So I think that there's so much miscommunication and perception, assumed perception from top down and from bottom up that, oh, well, you know, command staff or brass or my sergeants or whatever, they think this, they said this, they're doing this because blah, 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 because that's my perception of it. When in reality, they're doing it for totally different reasons or for something else that was going on. And there's just this like barrier of us not seeing it. And then the other way around too, right? Like you're on a squad and patrol. Oh, well, the supervisors see it as, oh, well, this is a shitty attitude or whatever's going on here. These guys are doing this or complaints or whatever it might be, right? And they're seeing it from their office or from wherever they are in their point of view. And I think that if there was a little bit more openness and willingness to kind of cross that barrier, which I know could be hard just based on agency dynamics and individual desire to do it. But I think that there's like some open conversation before we get to the point of, to your example, we're going into a meeting with a union rep and the sergeant to go over one misspelled word in a report. It can prevent a lot of that. I saw an agency recently when I was there working through some stuff to kind of get their program up and running. I'm in a meeting with the chief, kind of going over things, and he's got the perception that like he has anything that comes to him, he will listen with open ears and they will go through it and he will explain why it's this way, why this decision was made, why, oh, you want this? Okay, let's work through how we could get that. His perception is that that is how he's leading things, right? But there is another piece of the department that their perception is that that isn't the case, that they've gone to the chief a bunch of times about
Yeah.
something and that it never goes anywhere. And there's this breakdown somewhere in the middle of that communication. So that then both sides are just butting heads and it's festering into understanding and cynicism and feeling, like neither side is getting anywhere. So I guess that's a very long-winded way of saying that sometimes just some basic, more proactive and understanding communication, whether it's between ranks or squads or roles or whatever it may be, can sometimes minimize some of those things just if you have a little bit of understanding as to where and why the other side has gone that way.
Yeah. I mean, you said a lot, and I really want to kind of peel that back a little bit more because we're talking about accountability, self accountability, and that takes self reflection, self awareness, right? There's a huge piece of EQ. Administrator, the chief thinks that they're doing well, and they might be doing a lot that the line doesn't see, but then the line's not seeing it, and the chief might not be recognizing a lot of blind spots.
I think it's where both sides, in that sense, have to set an ego aside, have to set
Mm.
a "this is my role" aside, have to set a "well, I don't wanna meet with the chief because it's the chief," or "I don't" right? Like, that whole piece of it has to get set aside so that you can find some common ground to maybe adjust some of those things. So, I think that both sides have to hold themselves accountable, but there also has to be some accountability for each other to work to a place where it can be kind of more cohesive, if that makes sense.
Yeah. What were you gonna say, Rich?
I think it's easy to get complacent as a boss, whether it be at the first line level or all the way up to chief. You get complacent and you fall into management instead of leadership. It's easy to do, and we lose the ability to mentor. Your example is an excellent example of where conversation and some mentorship as to why you were kicking it back would have probably made that person go, that makes perfect sense. Thank you so
Mm-hmm.
much. And look at you as a mentor more so than as a boss. So
Yeah.
so it's little things. It's not rocket science. I know we want to kind of just, try to, fly to the moon with this stuff, but it's literally like just taking that extra second and go, what kind of person did I need at this level? As a supervisor or as a leader, and I'm leading my squad, and somebody is obviously struggling, whether it be paperwork, whether it be personal issues, whether it be on the job issues, literally going, what kind of person did I need as a leader, and becoming that person, like literally just becoming that person.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I say it's really it's easy, but also you can kind of get bogged down into the day to day grind of policing.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
we've touched on these like, leadership, self accountability, victim mindset, stuff like that. And it boils down to our thoughts and our actions. So when we have a boss that we're telling ourselves a story about whatever he's doing. And I've recently transitioned where I had a boss that's totally disappeared. Like no one knew like what he did, where he was, very to himself. And now I'm at a boss, a captain that's literally in every roll call. And it's way too much. But to when we interpret the different types of leadership styles, especially from the officer standpoint, you know, what are we telling ourselves about what they're saying? And then how are we taking action on that? Or how am I interpreting something down the chain? Because it can come down the chain and I'm telling myself a story about what it is that could be completely off base. So, is it 100% true? Is a question that I like to ask myself. Like, hey, is so and so out to get me, or is he doing this for this reason? This reason, I've asked myself, do I know that to be 100% true? The answer usually is no. Like, okay, if I can't say it's 100% true, then there is some other factor out there that I've not considered. There's something that hasn't reached me something that I have not been informed of as to why that decision is being made. And we also have to have that perspective, at least for me, as a supervisor. So I
Hmm.
know that, hey, they're getting trickle down information. They might not have this full story. So there is, and I hate to use the word balance, but hey, there's that communication piece. Like, hey, I have to, at least have contact with the officers and my sergeants, like, so they know my message and my mission. They can't just assume. I can't leave them to assume. So a lot of that with the self accountability, like the only thing that I can control is myself. Like I can't control anybody else. I can control how I respond to what my bosses have, and I can control what I'm telling everybody else in my message, in my mission.
From interviews to jail calls, Ditto Transcripts delivers fast, confidential, and court ready transcription for law enforcement agencies. Ditto is CJIS compliant and is already working with agencies all over the U.S., including the Washington State Patrol and the National Park Service Investigations Unit. Get started now at dittotranscripts.com. That's dittotranscripts.com. To hear details about all the applications of Ditto transcripts and exactly why this is a key solution for your organization's workload issues, check out episode 232.
You train for the threats you can see, but what about the ones you can't? United Diagnostic Services brings hospital grade diagnostic technology directly to first responder agencies, making early detection of cardiovascular disease and cancer more accessible than ever. UDS provides comprehensive early detection programs using advanced ultrasound, CT calcium scoring, stress echoes, and innovative blood panels to identify potential health risks long before symptoms appear. It's proactive, on site, and built specifically for those who serve. Early detection saves lives and careers. Learn more at udshealth.com. Yeah, what you all said, I think, combines really healthfully, which is that recognition, like, you don't know. And there's a humility piece, there's an ego kind of grappling piece, but truly, like, we don't know. And I try to tell them, I started saying this to my sergeants when I was pretty new in my role. And I was like, my goal and my intent, like, I don't know better, I know different. And if we all do our jobs the best way, then we'll have the complete picture, including the officer perspective, including the chief perspective, including the community perspective, to come together. And it might sound cheesy, but like, combine our insight to do the best strategy we can, because the officer is going to see it different, and we have to trust what they're telling us. It doesn't mean we can just do what they want, because we have our own roles to play into that. So I think that it's so interesting to me, and it makes sense too, but like, we started talking about identity, but then we're talking about all these different things and how they factor into like our stress in our job and how we process a job. But really, it's like, how do we feel our role matters? Is there trust? Is there openness, introspection? Like, these things are all intersecting in this way, and I think that's what's so fascinating about this conversation. But it's one thing comes up when we talk about openness and this trust dynamic. I love how David really illustrated this, like, well, do you actually know that to be true? Because I think that staying curious and recognizing there's a lot we don't know is a really healthy theme to kind of bring this into the thing, right? Like, is the agency out to get me? I might have certain anecdotes where I think so, and then I might have certain anecdotes, like different people where like, well, they're not out to get me. So like, so what now? What? Like, what do I do with all this? Like, do I carry the stress, or do I come up with like a meaningful like value system and strategy that can help me navigate my career and my life in the most meaningful way? Like, what is the goal here? Well, the goal is to do the best I can and pay the bills and do a job that's pretty cool and also take care of my family, but not be complaining about my job, 4 hours every weekend when I'm home with my loved ones. Like, yeah, that's not the goal. So what do I need to work back and figure out? Um, what kicks up in you guys, kind of bring it back to like the constructive things that people can think about and do.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, it's a petri dish for a lot of these thoughts, right? And I think the three things that really go into these thoughts that we're talking about, these negative thoughts or negative thought patterns, is ambiguity up and down. We tend to believe that we know everything at the lower level, and if we don't, we'll fill in all the blanks, and that's what we do as a culture. If you don't give me the why, I'll fill it in and I'll make it my narrative and I will spread it as far and wide as I possibly can. And then it becomes that us versus them. So I think First off is we have to provide the why. As leaders, we have to provide the why, and even as folks, with their gripes or actual complaints, also have to provide the why. Why do I feel like this? And be able to provide that to leadership, and leadership has to provide the why as to some of the things that we're doing as an agency. You don't have to always agree with it, but I think most folks would have a better understanding and would look at leadership in a different light instead of leading with a collar device or a shoulder board, and actually leading with openness and humility. Like, this is why we're doing it. You Like I said, you may not agree with it, but this is why we have to do it. The second thing is, time pressures, and the false ones that we put on ourselves. As leaders, we get bogged down in paperwork and we send it down. It always goes down to the lowest level because somebody didn't do their job. Now, is that a Rich problem, or is it a Megan problem? No, it's a Dave and an Eric problem, because you waited to the last minute to do the thing that you had to do. Last time I checked, nobody's ever died of an administrative emergency, and we need to stop treating these administrative emergencies as such, because it just causes more of that anxiety and more of that hypervigilance within the organization. And then lastly, we started with this thought, especially with our identity, is, we all carry the phones around, right? We all have these. Would we be okay with our phones with no chargers at 60%? Most people would say no. So why is it okay for us to come to work in that capacity? Well, what are
Yeah.
we doing to recharge ourselves? Are we taking the opportunity to do the things that we were doing prior to the job? And I ask that question when I'm in front of a lot of people. Like, what was the last time you did the thing that made you whole, and recharge those batteries? So I think if we practice those three things, it kind of would lend us to maybe see the other side of the coin more often than totally pick apart what we're seeing or what we're perceiving as an agency.
Yeah, I love that tie back into wellness. Megan, what about you?
Yeah, and see, if we stop filling in all the blanks, then we're gonna have all this extra time that was spent in feeding the rumor mill that we can now spend on actually bettering ourselves. I'm kidding, but no, I think, from an individual standpoint, I guess I will go back to more of the identity piece. Is just, yes, the job is going to show you things that are going to change you in some ways, right? Like, nobody's arguing with that. There's going to be impact that it's going to have on your life. But if you let that take over your entire life and you don't proactively take time to make that separation, right? Like, make that separation between I'm at work doing my job, doing this role on my shift, whatever it may be. Find a routine of some sort, and maybe it's going to be different for everybody, right? That works for you to kind of separate yourself from I'm done on my shift now, and now I'm going home and I'm going to go do whatever with my family or my friends or whoever. Find something to kind of make that a distinct thing, right? Like, some people like to use the car if you have a bit of commute, like listening to something, or take a little bit of time in your driveway, or get home. And some people have a routine that, like, they get home and they take 15 minutes, get a shower, change, whatever it
Hmm.
is, right? Like, find something like that that works for you, so that you have that kind of muscle memory almost of that separation. Um, and also find things that are outside of work that you enjoy that you can still proactively pursue. Um, that maybe you did before, maybe you didn't, right? Maybe they're new. Maybe there's something you wanna try that you hadn't before that you can do now, right? Or maybe there's something that you love doing before and you haven't done it in a while and you recognize that and you need to get back on the horse and keep it going, right? So, without proactively, like, taking those things or finding those things or writing them in your calendar if you have to, the job can quickly make you lose them, right? Or you can become so consumed in it that you end up losing them. So I think that it's sometimes we get to this thing where it's just like, oh, we'll just do this. No, you have to be proactive about it. You have to take initiative on your own to find those things, to prioritize those things so that everything else doesn't take over. Because at the end of the day, if you don't, you're going to be left with, a not very healthy and not very happy life, which is what you should have, regardless of what job you do and regardless of the things that maybe change you from it.
Yeah, I love those constructive examples you gave. One being in the daily grind, everyone has 5 minutes. Like, if you think you
Yeah.
don't, you're full of it. Check your phone
Yeah.
for screen time.
Stop scrolling on here for 5
Yes,
minutes and do
yes.
something
Like,
productive with your life.
this this might sound terrible to some people, but, I am on my phone a lot. I create content. I'm dealing with Canva and social media and all these things really heavily for a while. I've improved, but at one point, like, my weekly or my daily average was like 4 hours, maybe some more, like, depending on the week. And I'm like, oh, I don't like that. Like, recently I had this one, and it's not normal, but it was like 2.5. And I was like, that's a huge win. Right. So, like, that just take the little things, because if you sit in your car, your driveway for 5 minutes, and you close your eyes and you breathe, or you think, like, you write down 2 gratitudes or whatever, like, that's gonna feed you, right? And then you, like Meg pointed out, like, what are the things that you'd like to try? Like, is this life as you perceived it, life as you dreamed it up? And if not, like, yeah, let's take some ownership. It's not to shame you. It's like, you have the power to do it. You got a lot of people pulling for you, a lot of family members, friends, and loved ones that will bring you along if you let them. All right, David, over to you,
There's
man.
there's so much action piece that is coming up here with what y'all said, Rich and Megan, like being proactive, finding your peace in comfort. Really, there's a lot of messaging out there that you have to be uncomfortable, which is great. I agree with, but we can't forget about our peace and you know how we find that and who we show up as. It's funny we're even diving into this month in my program. We're diving into the alter ego effect, where we talk about who are our alter egos, who do we show up as, who are we pretending to be. So we're diving into those action pieces, those totems. The book The Alter Ego Effect actually goes into like artifacts and totems, using that to kind of trigger like, hey, I'm home now. What am I doing to kind of trigger like, hey, I am dad now. I am dad now. I am dad now. So when you walk through that door, you're as much as you can being intentional about how you're showing up as that identity, because you have to set aside the other identity. And you can break it down a lot. I mean, I like to talk about how you have the warrior identity, the professional, and then as a parent or as a spouse. But then you can break it down even further. Like, who am I showing up as in the gym? Who am I showing up as um, for each child? Because I have three, and I tell you, I'm a different parent for each child too. So when you bring that intentionality, and specifically with coming home, I think that's kind of like the biggest piece is coming home and turning off that cop mode or what have you. And it's different for each person. You have to discover what that is. And for a long time, for me, it was turning on a specific type of music on my drive home that was relaxing and not triggering, not like motivational or anything, just relaxing, like finding that peace, like we said,
Mhm.
finding that peace and comfort. And then I would take off my duty belt and leave it in the trunk of my car. So it's a very specific action. All right, I am leaving this here. And then when I go home, I could take off or when I walk through the door, I could take off the rest of my uniform, but I've already started that process. So there's so many things we can do with meditations, using totems and artifacts as to how do we switch altered egos, and how do we have it become a habit? Because a habit's going to become a practice. And then a practice is going to become who you are. Just it's going to become simply who you are. But it takes time. It takes that proactive piece, and it takes finding your peace and comfort. Everything that
Yeah, I love it. And there's a couple things I want to highlight. One is like the discomfort conversation. And for a lot of people, a lot of us types, like, sitting in quiet is really uncomfortable. And maybe that's what we need. Maybe we need, or probably a lot of us could use more parasympathetic than sympathetic, right? Um, I've shared the example of rushing home when we had a newborn and like getting upstairs and trying to help out. But I was so jacked up and so, like, my aura was not helpful. Be like, hey, what can I do? And I was, just stressed. Like, eventually my wife's like, I get it. Like, I see what you're doing. I appreciate it, but you didn't get your workout in. And if you want to take like 10, 15 minutes, actually, if you could take 10, 15 minutes and like throw some weights around and see, like she was giving me permission, like what a great partner spouse. But she also recognized like, yeah, you're hurting more than you're helping. So go like unload that stress. Another thing I really love that David described is like the thresholds, right? It's like a kind of a play on what Megan was sharing about the ritual. He gave some example there, but like one of the most high performing people I know was a cop. He's actually been on the show a long time ago. He was a cop. He's an ATL, like SWAT team dude, but he's now like in the corporate world. But he's like, I see what he's doing. He's a dad of 3. He's doing judo. He's doing jujitsu. He's like crushing it in corporate life, like a leader, absolutely, a family man. He's training this like little dog to do like Schutzen type work because he wasn't allowed to get like a big dog, like sport dog. So he got this little dog to do all the same bite work, which is just hilarious to me. But all this takes so much time. And at one point I was like, how do you do all this? Like, how do you get plugged in? I was like, I know you have the drive, but like he explained, it's huge on thresholds, right? Like he explained what David said, which he's like, when I walk home, I don't work at blank company. Like they don't pay me to be on. You know, some of us have a difficult challenge there, right? But we're probably not on call all the time. And so he's like, I am dad. I am husband. When I leave the house, when I get on the mats, I'm not dad and husband because I'm not going to do anything. Like I don't have my phone on me. I am I am a practitioner, right? I'm a martial artist, right? And I'm like, okay, that is such a healthy way to compartmentalize and a way to introduce these different things because when we talk about identities, we talk about personas, and I don't want to kick up another hour of conversation, but I think that there's an entry point for people to think about how they are or aren't, you know, conducting their lives in a way that's meaningful and of service. So to them. So mission, I mean, that's one thing I wrote down. And then what are you? And y'all have spoken on this. What are you to say like I am a mom? I am a daughter. I am a son. I am a friend. I'm a neighbor. So it's not just, well, I'm a cop and nothing else, right? You're so many things, and we need to be able to prioritize those and recognize that the cop thing, it's not going to be forever. It doesn't matter who you are. It won't be. It can't be. So let's not lead with that. I want to kind of go around and we've covered so much, but I want to go around and get any closing thoughts from all of you as we bring this conversation together. And please, in that, do share where people can reach out and get connected with you. Rich.
Yeah, I'll just close it up as, a lot of what we talked about today comes back down to being intentional and being present. But not only with yourself, but with that sphere of influence, especially if you're a boss, right? So if you have a sphere of influence, they, as much as you think that you don't have an impact, you do. They're watching everything that you do. So if you're telling your folks to do all these things to make themselves right, and you're not doing them, they're not going to do them. They're not going to buy into what you're trying to do. So practice that intentional mindset. Be present even when things are good. We don't have to wait for the bad thing to happen to show up for people, and I think really take that time to hold yourself accountable, both as a boss and as an individual. And I think that you'll see a huge change not only in the way you go about business as a person, but I think in that influence that you have. Um, I think that is a lot of what's missing in policing, especially at the leadership level, is that level of humility and a level of vulnerability. Like let's face it, most bosses don't want to let their guard down and kind of show that they may be struggling themselves. But
Hmm.
that would go much further. We're not asking you for your childhood trauma story, but let the guard down every now and again, and kind of show your folks that you're really no different. You just hold a title that gives you a little bit more responsibility. They could find me on the gram at Rich Creamer _77 on LinkedIn. The podcast is on 5 different platforms. The Respond to Reset podcast, Lighthouse Health and Wellness, Blue Cancer Connect, Mutts with the Mission, all pots of the things that I'm doing in my purpose in giving back to folks that are out there doing the job each and every day. and, hopefully providing a voice for those people.
Awesome. Thank you, man. Megan.
Yes. So I would say I'm gonna go back just the identity piece since that's kind of where we started. Just to remember and keep in your mind proactively that you're so much more than just your job. I know that that can be hard for us to say, hard for us to believe, but it is true. Whether you're talking about someone who's, maybe looking to move on, right, is looking to get another job or is looking into retirement, from a skill set perspective, you and the training that you've had and what you've done as a police officer translates to so many things that people in this normal world cannot do and cannot understand. So don't belittle yourself to being just a cop. You're so much more than that. And then also on the more personal side, the job is going to go away at some point, right? Whether that's because of it's cut short for something that you didn't anticipate, or you just decide that it's time to move on, or you get to retirement, right? Like no matter what, at some point, the job is no longer going to be there. And you really need to make sure that you are growing all the other parts of yourself outside of just your job, whether you are married or in a relationship or have kids or friendships or whatever circles or people are close to you, or you're an athlete or whatever you're into, right? Like make sure that you spend time to enjoy those things, to grow those things, to just be all of the other parts of you that you are other than your job, because at some point the job is no longer going to be there, and you're going to be a lot better off when that does happen if you have intentionally taken the time to kind of grow all those other parts of you. So not to sound cheesy in that way, but it's just true, and I would be missing out on my whole goal here if I didn't mention this, but also just knowing that your relationship to that identity, putting all of your self-worth in a job, can be very dangerous and it can be really risky, especially in times where you do start struggling. When we look at suicide prevention, all of that kind of stuff, we didn't get into as much today, but if you're putting all of yourself into one thing, when that change comes, when the job is no longer there, it can be so much harder for you. So do yourself a favor and try to work through that before you get to the point where the job changes and you become in that identity crisis. Um, where can you find me? Let's see. New Jersey, unfortunately. Just kidding. But you can find me on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest way to get in touch with me on there, or my full time job is at the Cummings Foundation for Behavioral Health. You can find me there. And just various other places that I try to pitch in and help out or raise money for or do things. But most of all that stuff's on my social media. So that's probably the easiest place to find it.
Awesome.
So
Thank you, Megan.
if you follow Megan, I ask that you jump on and you support her latest venture, which is helping out Blue Cancer Connect. She's running a half
Mm.
marathon in Virginia Beach that I will be there cheering her on as she raises money for Blue Cancer Connect. So do yourself a favor, find her, hit that link, and support a great cause as well.
Yeah, awesome. Love that shout out from the side, the
Yep.
support in here, because
Yeah, you
Megan
always
wasn't
get my
gonna say
baby.
it.
You're coming
Oh, so
coming
thank
down,
you.
Megan.
Yeah, a couple quick things. I mean, we said it a few different ways, but recognizing the finality of job and life, like that's it can be dismal if we let it, or it can be empowering. And like make your time matter. One, find the joy and recognize that you want to be here. Recognize you want to do this job, and find the good. Like you sometimes have to dig, find it and harness that. Like find the joy. This job can be so much resource and all that comes with it, not just hits and punches in the gut. So like find it. And then with that, like that's why I and so many people love like the stoicism and memento mori. Like I reflect on it a lot, and sometimes that's like, okay, imagine you have 2 weeks left in this job. Like nothing bad's going to happen, but you're just not allowed to do the job anymore. Which some people might think that that's like a bad connotation. Well, let's just say, so how do I want to treat people? Like, what is that? What is so important in my inbox? And sometimes that does. It might sound cheesy, and maybe the people that work with me might not see it, but like that does prompt me to do something a little different, or that does prompt me to get out of my desk and take one stupid call, rather than just finish my inbox, which will never be finished. So, a little nod there. David, why don't you bring us home? Thoughts to end with and where people can find you.
Absolutely. I think it comes down to who are we showing up as, and who do we pretend to be? Are we saying that we are this particular husband, father, spouse, parent, what have you? Are we actually being that person that we pretend? So who are you showing up as when you go to work? Who are you showing up as when you get home? Who are you showing up as when it's just you and no one's watching? Um, so I think that we have to ask ourselves that question, because then it brings forth that intentionality. Then you can find out, hey, what can I change? What can I actually do? How can I keep the promises I've made to myself? Um, so really got to dive into that. I think I'll leave it at that. I think that's kind of covers the identity. But yeah, you can find me. I'm on the socials. David Smith, real name, common spelling. So it's probably davidsmith.ar. Or you can find me at Apogee Responders, is also on the socials. So, and then I got locally here in Virginia, the Responders Ruck. It's open to anybody, first responders, family, support, anybody to come out and get your 3 miles on once a month. So, and I'm looking for that to expand here in the future. So, keep your eye out for good things.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I know that there's so much that people can dig in and get a lot from this. So thanks again.
No,
Listen,
thank
Thanks
you,
for
Eric.
having us.
thank you.
Thank you for tuning into another episode of Blue Grit Radio. As always, support this community by subscribing, giving us a 5-star review, and following, liking, and sharing posts on Blue Grit Wellness on Instagram. You can reach me there or email me at bluegritwellness@gmail.com. Be well and stay gritty.